is take you back in history, about 250 years ago, to a time when the United States was not a country. We were actually colonies. Here we go. The very first thing we're going to do, pretty dusty in those days, and remember I said that you wouldn't have as many clothing items as you have today, and they wouldn't be able to be cleaned as often. So oftentimes, the ladies, especially in the houses, when they're at home, they would wear an apron, and as you can tell, this apron is quite old. Maybe I should wash it. I've tried washing it, but it doesn't seem to get any better looking. So.
Lovely.
Looks so cute, Paula.
All right. Now, we're going to put a mop cap on her. Colonial people did not believe in bathing as often as we do. We bathe once a day, probably maybe every other day. They maybe bathe once a month. So we've got to keep her hair nice and dirty.
Oh, my word.
The reason why they bathe only once a month is because they thought it wasn't healthy for you to bathe. Forward. Bow. Bow. Okay, shoulder, shoulder. Good job. Okay, cross it. Okay, come back. Seeing them, the Apache screamed wildly and ran across the clearing. But the slavers, advancing among them, tossed the Apache about like leaves in a wind. Seizing the strongest in the columns, they quickly clamped wrist and ankle shackles on them. Thrusting aside the old men and now, again, because he may only have one set of clothing, he needs an apron. Okay. And because he'll be living in Williamsburg, and you can take everything he owns. Maybe coming back and forth every once in a while, but he'll have everything he owns in his bag. So let's see what Kevin has in his slate. Okay, I'm really glad that you took this out. Okay. Now, this is sort of his passport. If he's walking down the road, remember he's a slave, and he cannot come and go the way he wants. If he's not working on the plantation, and he's walking around, if his master allows him to do that, this piece of paper will tell anybody that he meets that he's got permission to be walking around. My goodness, I was so busy sewing, I didn't notice that I had some company. I'm so excited to see you boys and girls. It's been so long since we've had children here at Mount Vernon. Oh, you're going to make it so happy here this afternoon. Thank you, children, so much for helping here. It's time to do our lesson, so let's sit down. Thank you so much. Last tax that really made the people angry. You see, the people in the colonies had a favorite drink. Their favorite drink was tea. And this is how tea looked in those days. Tea, and they threw them into Boston Harbor. In fact, there was so much tea in Boston Harbor that the water was supposed to have turned brown. Can you imagine that? Well, how do you think the king felt about that?
Not so
He
good.
was hopping mad. He said not only do they not want to pay taxes, but look at them, they are destroying property. That property doesn't even belong to them. And so he sent his soldiers and he closed Boston Harbor. He wouldn't let any ships come and go, and he encircled Boston and wouldn't let the people out. They felt like they were being in prison. Well, all those words, all that came down to us way down south in Virginia. And George heard about it, and he said, you know, I think I better go help because I know how to fight a war. We have to go fight those British. We have to let them know this is not okay. So he marched himself up. It took him Barack Obama. Okay? Alrighty, so the Democratic Party has who for vice president?
Joe Biden.
And who for president? Thank you. Now we have another major political party. It's called the Republican Party.
Point of clarification. One of the two major political parties in the United States, John McCain, is the
Nominee.
nominee for president. The symbol of the party is the elephant. The nickname is Grand Old Party.
Yes, G-O-P. Grand Old Party. Well, come on up here, please. Very nicely read. Okay, and we'll put you over here. Okay, since the overhead's in the way. All right, so now this is the Republican Party, the G-O-P, Grand Old Party. It's really not as old as the Democratic Party, but there were so many people who belonged to this party that the people who wrote the newspapers, the satirists, chose this symbol of an elephant because an elephant is a very big animal, isn't it? Okay, now the first president who was a Republican was Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so it goes back as far as Abraham Lincoln. Do you have a point of clarification, Ellen?
Yeah, you already said it about president. You already said it about vice presidentship.
Okay, and that's the word you have.
Vice president.
Yeah, however, you don't know what it means, right?
I remember some of it.
Okay, stand up then. Let's say point of clarification.
A person who
Say
owns,
point of clarification.
point of clarification. A person who owns the president.
And he helps the president in several ways, okay? Number one, first of all, he can't vote. But if there is a tie in the Senate, we have 100 people in the Senate. If the vote is tied 50-50, the vice president gets to break that tie.